I'll tell you another one that's coming our way very, very soon. The government, the Brown government, has got a scheme called the BSF, Building Schools for the Future. And under BSF, over the next few years, they're going to either radically redevelop or flatten every single secondary school in England. And they're going to be doing it under PFI, Private Finance Initiative, which itself is a huge fraud on the taxpayer and a way of, in fact, privatising all our key essential industries and our key essential services, such as health, such as council maintenance, and such as schools. So it's a huge fraud, but that's by the by. The government is using this fraudulent PFI system, which is going to land us all in enormous debt. It's already destroying what's left of the health service, because hospitals are so indebted owing to PFI, they're having to sack doctors and nurses and shut beds and shut wards and leave old ladies dying in hospital trolleys. PFI is a large part of it. But worse than that is what they're going to do with it and why they're doing it. They're not knocking down every school in England, every secondary school, because they all need it. Some of them need it, a lot of them don't. Most of all, it doesn't, to be honest, matter if a school roof leaks. As long as you have discipline in a school, and decent exams with decent standards, and teachers who know how to teach and are allowed to slap the little buggers round the head when they're misbehaving, then you can teach people to a very high standard. My mum learnt to write while she was an evacuee during the war on a piece of slate. Didn't need a computer. People don't. In a little cold, shaky village hall of a school. You don't need big plush school buildings, in fact, if you've got discipline and good ways of teaching kids. But that's by the by. The fact is, they're going to be knocking down perfectly good schools. Why? Because BSF isn't about building better schools, it's about building a totally different kind of person. It's about mass integration. They've realised that immigration and multiculturalism is an utter disaster. They've realised it for two reasons. One, lots of people are voting for us, and that's not in the script. And two, on the Muslim side of the fence, they're becoming ever more radicalised, ever more alienated from our society, ever more hateful, and ever more likely to blow themselves up. Or at the very least to support people who blow themselves up. And the multiculturalists have realised this isn't working, so now instead of just saying it's not working, let's reverse the tide, they're saying voluntary association between these different groups isn't working. Do you know they don't want to mix? White people don't want to send their kids to school to places where they're racially bullied. And for that matter, Pakistani and Bengali parents living in this country don't want to send their kids to schools where they are taught, even at the age of 4, that homosexuality is entirely normal. So neither group wants to mix. So our liberal elite are now looking at this and saying, if they don't want to mix, and if their refusal to mix is causing problems, such as a BNP vote on one hand and terrorism on the other hand, we'll force the buggers to mix. And that's what BSF is about. It's not about building schools for the future. It's about massive, forcible integration, which is going to give a huge problem to one group in particular. And that's the white, Anglo-Saxon, Celtic middle class. The people who've been able to run away from the bad bits of Manchester, and the bad bits of Burnley, and the bad bits of Oldham, and take their nice children and put them in nice schools. And they've done it mainly by what they call the postcode lottery, which is no lottery at all. It's if you've got enough money to move to a nice postcode area, your kids go to a decent school. If you haven't got enough money, it doesn't matter how bright they are, how much they can offer to our society in future, they are going to some sink hole where probably they're going to be a minority, an abused ethnic minority, because they're English, because they're white, under education authorities which have admitted, every single one of them in the country, that they don't keep any records at all of racist bullying of white kids. Simply isn't done. But up until now it's been the poor working class who've had to put up with that. And as of the next couple of years, it's all going to change. The Labour government's already rolling out schemes in places like Brighton, experimental schemes, where they're abolishing selection by postcode, and it's literally selection by lottery. Which means that when it comes to Manchester, all over huge chunks of Manchester, your kids won't go, or your grandchildren, or your nephews and your nieces and so on, won't go to the school that's nearest. Their names will be shoved in a hat, basically, or a big lottery wheel, and they'll go to the school that's picked out. And actually, if you believe that, you're a fool, because that's what we're going to be told. But in fact, they'll be making sure that the kids from the nice white areas go to the really rough schools in the ethnic areas, because they're hoping somehow it's going to make them love each other. I think it's fantastic. Because up until now, this party has suffered one thing more than anything else, and that is that the subalterns, the lieutenants, the captains, haven't been there, because they've been able to move themselves and their families out of the trouble and hide in their nice middle-class lifestyle and the nice pieces on the edge or the suburbs of places like Manchester and pretend that they can get away from it. And it's finished, and I'm very glad it's finished, because the English middle classes are now going to suffer what the English working classes have suffered for the last 30 years. And it's about time too. And it's going to do us a great deal of good, because it's going to give us this flood of second lieutenants and captains, organisationally, the people that we need. And obviously it's wrong. Politically it's good for us, but it's an outrageous thing to use vast amounts of taxpayers' money, or rather to get the taxpayer in debt for generations, in order to genetically manipulate and socially engineer the next generation in pursuit of an utter fantasy that's already failed, this multicultural dream of theirs. It's absolutely outrageous. And kids are going to be beaten, and kids are going to die, and kids are going to commit suicide, and girls are going to die of anorexia and all the rest of it, because they're being forced into this huge meat grinder designed to turn them into the perfect citizens of the modern multicultural world, where all of a sudden everyone's going to love each other. It's an appalling fantasy. It's a kind of child sacrifice to do that to kids. And of course the people doing it, the Labour councillors, the Labour MPs, won't be for them, not for their kids, because they've got enough money to send their kids to private schools. So that's okay. They'll be the only ones. There's only going to be two blocks of people who can get away from this nightmare. And that's the extremely religious Muslims, who will send their kids to their religious schools, and none of our people are going to want to go to them at all, so they'll be pure for them. And there's the very, very rich upper-class liberals who can afford to send their kids to safe private/public schools. For everyone else it's going to be hell.